Good morning, Trumptopia. This is the Almost Daily Zencast, and I am your ever eccentric, humble, bizarre, authentic, genuine, no bullshit host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Today is Saturday, April 4th, 2020, an auspicious date in the middle of some dark and challenging times. Welcome back to the show, friends. Forgive me for my recent mini lapse. I haven't recorded a podcast in like 3 days, but that's because the universe needed me to take a little bit of time to focus on some personal private matters, and that has been a huge success. But I'm going to save my deeper thoughts and potential announcement about that particular subject matter for a little bit further down the road. I'm back. It's Saturday, and the world is in a pretty interestingly weird, bizarre place, isn't it? I hesitated there because first of all, I had the phrase, the world is on a string, kind of stuck and trying to get out, and also blocking all the other words in my head. And I'm not sure why that was the phrasing that wanted to come out at first, but also because I didn't want to cast this moment as too dark a moment. I didn't want to make it sound pessimistic and downtrodden. It is not all doom and gloom, my friends. If I may humbly suggest to you, there is something spiritual going on. Yes, there is, of course, also something physical going on, and perhaps also something, metaphorically, nefariously material going on. There's a lot of things going on. Let's leave it at that. First of all, I want to ask you, dear listener, how are you doing? If you're not doing well, know this. I send you my unconditional love, one human being to another. And I hope that has some meaning for you. And when I say that, I'm not like the politicians saying thoughts and prayers. When I say that, I mean that I'm literally and figuratively and metaphysically making the conscious effort to focus my energies and to broadcast them. Now, some people don't believe that that's a thing that we can do. And that's a shame, because that's like not believing in rainbows. They're there, but they are intangible, right? Energies are everywhere. There would not be a rainbow. We would not feel the warmth of the sun. We wouldn't understand what love is if there were not, categorically, unseeable energies flowing through us, around us, inside of us, outside of us, etc. If memory serves, it was Einstein who put it quite simply that all things are energy. I think I've brought this up in the show before, right? You don't need to understand physics to experience physics. You should put a pin in that. That sounds like a whole special miniseries to do. But E equals MC squared. There's a lot of math that can be unpacked from that statement, and the physics nerds love that kind of stuff. I'm a passive, non-math doing physics nerd, but there's another side to it, right? Physics can be understood intellectually through the comprehension of the mathematics used to describe the phenomena. But the thing we are pointing to is not the mathematics. That's just words on a page, like poems describing a beautiful face, or directions instructing you on how to produce a delicious pie. That's what physics is. It's just the words on the page. It's a foreign language to many of us because, they don't bother teaching us really high-end mathematics until we're just getting to that age where it's really hard for our fucking brains to do it. They should be teaching us language and math and all the things that we struggle with in college in early elementary. But that's a whole nother discussion, right? Should put a pin in that. We'll come back and do a really in-depth episode or discussion about why so many of us believe that education is fundamentally upside down and a little bit backwards. Even in its most glorious examples of doing good and empowering people through information, it's not living up to its fullest potential as a social construct because the way it is formed is all inside out and backwards. But we'll come back to that and do an in-depth talk about that with examples, and hopefully someday I'll even be able to assemble panels and have deep discussions from people with more authority on certain subjects than I have. But planting seeds for the future development and evolution of this very humble and ridiculously silly podcast show. But here we are on a Saturday in the middle of a global pandemic, struggling through a massive economic and personal shutdown. And can I share with you some of the things I have perceived during this time? There's a lot of pent-up frustration. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of fear and a lot of anger. And it's erupting on social media. It's not as if, I'm not pretending that social media wasn't already riddled with all of those things. But now that the vast majority of people are stuck at home, even more opinions and frustrations and angers and fears are being vented and shared and picked up and communicated virally, and we should pause, I think, in my humble opinion, we should pause and consider the following. Ideas can be just as virulent as any virus. I don't want to get into the debate today about whether or not the virus that we are being told that we are combating is real or is fake. I've already sort of done my first brush strokes on my thoughts about the COVID-19 conspiracy theory phenomenon. But let me just sort of sum up right now and bring this point to you really quick. And it's something that I've been posting a lot on social media because I see so many threads debating this theory or that theory, and so many people pissing in other people's faces for not knowing the quote-unquote conspiracy truth. Since January, I personally, very unofficially, very unscientifically, have seen over 25 variations of a COVID-19 or coronavirus conspiracy theory. So that's upwards of 30. I'm sure there's more I haven't seen. Some of them, I've already talked about. It's a conspiracy theory to assassinate Donald Trump. That one makes very little sense. And is clearly failing because he's currently not actively being impacted by this, according to his statements. I've also heard that this is some sort of Jewish conspiracy and that the quote Jews are not impacted by this. That one really relies on some serious global ignorance, because I'm fairly certain that there's the same amount of there's the same kind of concern being expressed by Jewish media outlets as all the other media outlets. And there's very similar reports of hospitals being overwhelmed and of, an ever-increasing number of identified cases coming out of Israel. But I digress. I'm not here to argue about which conspiracy theory is the truth. I'm here to ask some really difficult questions that most people in the conspiracy theory community don't really want to confront. I humbly invite you, dear listener, to set aside all debate as to which theory you think or other people think is the ultimate truth. And instead, I want you to zoom back and look at them all equally with a clear mind. I don't want you to take my word for this. If you're a conspiracy theory enthusiast, if you currently have a favorite conspiracy theory about coronavirus, this is my humble suggestion to you. If you don't, if you're completely, if you're completely opposed to buying into conspiracy theory, I also still humbly invite you to consider this and to look at it, should you have the time. I mean, we're all sitting around stuck at home, except for those brave or unfortunate souls, depending on your point of view, who are out there on the front lines doing their work and or helping those who are getting sick. If we all take a moment to take a step back, and while you work through this thought experiment with me, keep in mind that from my perspective, I would humbly suggest to everyone that this applies to every conspiracy theory subject. I could be wrong. I'm not pretending to know some absolute truth that y'all aren't aware of yet. I don't pretend to know nothing. In fact, I have before, and I will again, publicly, openly acknowledge that I know that I do not know everything. That I know there are things I cannot know. But let's digress. Let's take a moment and just contemplate this. Just think about it. If you zoom back and look at all conspiracy theories on a given subject, COVID-19 for today, and really look at them with a clear mind, having set down your biases, having abdicated your particular point of view, having let go of whatever attachments you're attached to, and you really just look at them and their claims and their statements, and most particularly the language they use, I humbly suggest to you that I have, and you would also, observe an undeniable pattern. Something that all of the theories have in common, one way or another, that needs to be reckoned with, that needs to be questioned, that needs to be where we're actually focused on. And here's what it is. Every single COVID-19 conspiracy theory that I've come across, and those individuals arguing that this chosen conspiracy theory is the absolute truth and everybody else is full of bullshit, they all have this one thing in common, and that is us versus them. Ideological, psychological, manipulating, neuro-linguistic programming. And like I said just a moment ago, if you're really honest with yourself and you really step back and you really authentically let go of your assumptions and your biases and your preferences, and you take a good, hard, clinically cold, and honest look at any nexus of conspiracy theory, at any theme of conspiracy theories, at any cluster of theories about a given subject matter, you will find that this is the thing they all have in common. Conspiracy theories about 5G, all kinds of reasons about what 5G is and who made it and who's deploying it and what it's supposed to do to us. but they all contain neuro-linguistic programming that encodes into you us versus them ideological conditioning. In other words, once you buy into any of the 30 different conspiracy theories about a particular subject matter, you encode yourself, you take on the indoctrination of us versus them. If you've never heard of us versus them ideology, let me break it down for you pretty simple. It is the false, completely artificial, manipulative indoctrination that you and the group that you belong to, quote, us, are righteous, and them, everybody else, are wrong. In other words, we are the righteous ones that know the truth, and all the rest of y'all are idiots. Go look at other conspiracy theorists' postings and tell me honestly, that the majority of the things that people post, promoting, advocating, and arguing for their favorite conspiracy theory, does not inherently have that form of self-elitism expressed in it. I'm not trying to spew hate at anybody. I'm not judging those people who are doing this, right? The individuals who have chosen a favorite conspiracy theory and then insist that everyone else is wrong. I'm not judging them. I'm inviting you and everyone else who might be listening to this to think about it, contemplate it, and then ask these same questions of those around you so that they may think about it and contemplate it. Because everybody who clings to an ideology, everybody who clings to a political party, everyone who clings to religious doctrine, everyone who clings to a particular conspiracy theory or a set of preferred conspiracy theories, really, in my humble opinion, really should be asking themselves if what I believe, if this statement, this group, this ideology, this label, if it truly contains the absolute truth, then why does it use neuro-linguistic mind control language? As I've said before, and I'll say again, because I think it's worth sharing, because I think it gives us clarity to see what's really going on, as opposed to argue with each other about which theory of what's really going on. Does that make sense? Do I sound crazy to you guys? I hope not. I keep getting asked, what do I think about COVID-19? And I think I've said this before, but it's worth saying again, just so that whoever is listening to this episode for the first time can hear it and know that they're not alone should they feel the same way. I think that there is a real disease. Human nature is one of those weird things where we believe ourselves separate from the rest of nature. Why? There's a whole episode's worth of reasons why that I may have already dipped into in a past episode, so I hope you find that. I hope that content flows right at you with your random jumping around of my podcast. But what fascinates me here about what I'm talking about, or where I'm trying to point to, is that human nature is not separable from the rest of the rest of nature, right? Like, we feel alone and separate and tangibly detached from that which we call nature, but we are not. We are born of it. And although we can walk around bipedally and jump up and down and get into aluminum tubes and fly all over the planet, we are inseparable from the rest of what we call nature. And so it's really naive. It's really ridiculously ignorant, in my opinion, to presume that Mother Nature does not have the capacity to generate a disease that would be our most dangerous predator. In fact, it is a ridiculously unnatural ideology to presume that we as a species deserve to live in a world where there are no natural predators. Now, that's a scary thing, I know, because we live in a world where we cherish the fact that there are no scary animals that eat us for dinner every day. Because that's a stressful thing to constantly be fighting for that level of survival. But that was the most natural and organic thing. We spent millennia living like that. We spent our entire evolutionary process living like that. To think that the result of our evolutionary process is to live without predators is ego. Now, I'm not saying that we should embrace death. No. I need to finish writing that death poem because I think that would be useful in this time. What I am saying is it's ridiculously, it's poor form, and it's ridiculously limiting. It's undermining to our own long-term trajectory to naively presume that Mother Nature couldn't be the one responsible for what's going on. Not in a punishing us for something kind of way, but rather that nature is a system of systems that strive for balance. And if there's one thing we should all agree on, is that our society, the way we live, the way we produce and create the things that we use, the way that we accumulate money and power, it's all toxic and it's all way out of balance. Okay, so I digress. Here's what's going on. We are going through something challenging, which may or may not be a malicious, man-made thing, which just as likely could be a perfectly organic Mother Nature thing. And instead of addressing it with clear minds, clear eyes, clear hearts, so that we can understand it clearly, we're wrapping ourselves up in ideological argumentation. While people are struggling to survive, while our brothers and sisters in certain fields are having to confront the dangers and the stress loads of working their jobs while the rest of us submit to this stay-at-home order. And there's a bunch of things we could unpack about how we're handling this, but I want to get to the core of what we can all do in common. I'm trying to make sure that I don't sound negative and pessimistic here. So if I could stop spiraling out of control and really sort of encapsulate my thoughts for today in something simple and direct. Fear is a liar. Do not let it in. Do not let fear into your mind or your heart or your soul. If it's already there, work through it. And here's that little secret that people pay millions of dollars to find out from gurus. Forgiveness is the key. If there is fear in you right now, forgive it. Confront it with a loving, compassionate forgiveness. And then tell it the truth. That it is fear, and that fear is a lie, and that it can transmute through that forgiveness that you're offering it. Second, whoever is in power behind all the puppets, they understand how fear works, and they're using it against us. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. Just in case you're only going to listen to this one episode and never going to listen to any other episode again from my podcast show. They use fear against us, but fear is a lie. Now, of course, there are things to fear because fear is also a natural reaction to things that threaten our life. But like I said, we've created a situation where very few things threaten our lives except for our own bullshit that we've created. So we've created a catch-22 of causing our own fears about survival. Those who are in control and would like to stay in control understand that. They also understand that violence is easily profiteered on. They also understand that the more divided, confused, disenfranchised, caught up in arguing and debating and fighting over ideology we all are, the harder it is for us as individuals, as families, as communities, as nations, and as a species to achieve healing. They know that. They're working in a way that counts on that. There are people right now, before this whole lockdown thing happened, there were people already fuming at the mouth, ready for a bloody revolution. Now that we are being asked, mind you, there's a lot of people out there saying that we're under quarantine. We are not. There are places that might be. But generally speaking, in terms of what recommendations, legislations, and ordinances, or whatever you want to call them, decrees, have been announced state by state, nation to nation, from what I've gathered, we are not under martial law. We are not under quarantine. We are being asked and encouraged to stay at home. Now, is that one little stepping stone towards those higher orders of oppression? Maybe. Maybe not. The real important thing is, like I said at the beginning of the show, or I put in the title here, is we can be busy living in fear of all the things that the fearmongers want us to fear. We can be busy fighting each other over which conspiracy theory is the absolute truth. We can keep busy accusing each other of being this or that. Or we can get busy healing. And I don't just mean in the mundane way, but in the spiritual sense, that all the prophets, all the messengers taught. And where does that healing stem from? Unconditional love and forgiveness. Now, those are two things that the system of oppression have spent bazillions of dollars, endless amounts of effort, and oodles of time trying to convince us as a species don't exist, or if they do exist, are impotent. And, well, there's several of us here whose calling it is to remind us and each other and the world that those are lies. Those are fear-based lies. Love is more powerful than greed. Love is more powerful than power. Now, what is it that we all admire so much? What is it that our society encourages us to admire? Power and greed. Isn't that weird? We pay lip service to love, but we do not exercise it. We do not practice it. We do not teach our children how to really tap into it. We demand it. We demand it of each other. And occasionally, we truly know how to give it. But we are so distanced from its fullest form. We are so distracted from its deepest depths. We are so unfamiliar with love in its fullest dimensions that we generally admire power and money much more. This moment in time, this global shutdown regardless, or is the right word irregardless? I forget. It's one of those things like flammable, inflammable. They both have a meaning, but since we are common use lazy speakers, we've merged them together and now their different meanings are lost. Regardless of everything I had just said there, what was I talking about? Regardless of whether this moment is part of a nefarious New World Order plan or whether it's an honest, if totally bungled and totally fucked up attempt to mitigate the impact of an organic pandemic, this moment contains within it opportunities that are deeper and more profound and more important than debating the theories and arguing about whether or not, etc., etc., etc. This moment we are living through is a moment to confront our deep-seated fear of healing. That fear is a lie that has been indoctrinated into us for centuries. Why? Because there is a test going on in this dimension. And that test is, will you choose unconditional love, forgiveness, and transformative healing? Or will you choose to cling to all the other optional distractions, like fear, like hate, and violence? And forgive me for having to say this, but that is a test that we have been failing since we toppled the Tower of Babel. Every day we have failed that test as a collective species. But this opportunity is a time for us to truly unite and transcend that failure. I humbly encourage you to set aside, to investigate what it means to abdicate your mental constructs. I humbly invite you to look within, not with predefined, pre-established projections of what you will find in there, but with a bold and brave nakedness inside yourself. Go in there not assuming that you know what you will find, but rather with the willingness and the awe and the freedom and the clarity to truly discover who and what you are deep within. Because as that line from Fight Club reminds us, you're not your bank account, you're not your khakis, you're not the car you drive. I'm sure I butchered the line. But we are not those things. We are not our politics. We are not our religion. We are not our fears. We are not our ideological constructs. We are not our mental attachments. Those are all distractions, my friends. And so, as we continue, as we move forward through these challenging times, I invite you, I humbly implore you to set down all these exhausting mental paradigms, all these limiting, indoctrinated belief systems, and just welcome within yourself the truth that is always constantly being revealed within yourself. That's the true revelation. In my humble opinion, the true revelation is the deep internal unfolding, the fractal spiral that is blossoming within us. And no one can tell you what that is. No one can even tell you how to find it beyond the vague term, go meditate and look within. At any rate, I've rambled on enough for today, folks. As always, thank you for tuning in. May peace, love, and grooviness, and forgiveness, and healing blossom in your heart. Stay tuned for more, folks, as I come back with other things to talk about in other segments, and as I finally, really, truly get around to editing and updrafting past episodes. I have been your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, and today's music has been Neofunk 101 Remix. The revolution is not in your mind, but behind it. That's my fictional DJ character, DJ Z. Until next time.